He grabbed the nurse by her hair and slammed her face into the tile floor. Blood sprayed across white linoleum. 10 gunmen stormed Fort Resolute Military Medical Center, executing the 2 front gate guards before their bodies even hit the ground. They shot a doctor in the chest for reaching toward a phone. They kicked open patient rooms and put rifles in the faces of 70-year-old veterans too weak to stand. The leader walked through the carnage, smiling, because intelligence told him this hospital held 1 federal witness and 0 threats. Intelligence was wrong. 3 floors up, a rookie nurse with a ponytail and a borrowed badge heard the screams, reached under a supply cart, and pulled out a loaded weapon. She had been dead for 3 years. Today she was the only one who could keep everyone else alive. If this story grabs you the way it grabbed me, I need you to do one thing right now. Hit subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and ride with me all the way to the end. You will not see this coming. And drop a comment, tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story reaches across the world. Now let me take you back to 6 hours before those bullets flew. Emily Carter pulled into the hospital parking lot at 6:46 a.m., 14 minutes before her shift started. She turned off the engine, but didn't get out. She sat there with both hands on the steering wheel, eyes moving across the building, the entrances, the windows, the roofline. She counted the security cameras. She traced the sidewalk to every exit door. She noted which ones had crash bars and which ones required badge access. Then she got out, locked her car, and walked inside like a woman applying for a library card. Nobody looked twice. That was the whole point. Fort Resolute Military Medical Center sat 7 miles from one of the most heavily guarded Army installations in Arizona. It served soldiers, veterans, federal employees, and occasionally people whose names didn't appear on any patient roster. The staff was a rotating mix of civilian nurses, Army medical officers, and specialists who showed up for 3 weeks and vanished without saying goodbye. Emily had chosen this hospital for a reason. Close to a military base meant heavy security infrastructure, surveillance, armed guards, quick response times. It meant safety. At least that's what she told herself every morning when she looked in the mirror and pretended to believe it. The woman staring back at her was 34 years old. Blonde hair, no makeup, no rings, the kind of face that slides right out of your memory the moment you look away. She had spent years perfecting that invisibility. It was the most important skill she owned, and it had nothing to do with nursing. "You must be the new hire," a voice hit her the second she walked through the staff entrance. Emily turned. A woman in her 50s stood behind the nurse's station, arms folded, reading glasses balanced on the tip of her nose like they were about to jump. Her badge said, "Linda Marsh, head nurse, ICU." Her face said, "I've already decided I don't like you." Emily Carter, "Yes, ma'am." Linda looked her over, slow, the way a mechanic looks at a used car with suspiciously low mileage. "How old are you?" 34. "You look 25. Good genetics." Linda dropped a clipboard on the counter hard enough to make the pen cup rattle. "Station 4, 2 post-op patients. 1 Army colonel who thinks every beep on his monitor means he's flatlining. Keep him calm, keep your charting clean, and don't bother Dr. Mercer unless someone's actually dying." Emily took the clipboard. "Got it." She turned to walk away and Linda called after her. "Carter." "Yes, ma'am." "The last rookie I trained quit after 3 days. Cried in the bathroom on day 2. Don't be her." Emily almost smiled. She had once performed a tracheotomy on herself with a pocket knife and a hollowed-out pen cap in a bombed-out basement in Aleppo, while 3 insurgents searched the floor above her. Crying in a hospital bathroom wasn't on her list of concerns. "I'll do my best," she said. She walked away. Linda watched her go and leaned toward the nurse beside her, a young woman named Priya Anand. "Something's off about that one," Linda said quietly. "She seems fine to me." "That's what's off. Nobody's that calm on their first day." Linda was right to notice. She just didn't know why. Emily Carter didn't exist. Not really. The Social Security number was manufactured. The nursing degree was real, but earned under a false identity. The work history was fabricated by a man at the Pentagon who specialized in building paper lives for people the government needed to erase. Her real name was Lieutenant Commander Emily Ann Hale, United States Navy. She had been one of the first women to complete SEAL qualification through a classified program so buried that even most four-star generals had never heard of it. She had served in Syria, Iraq, and at least 2 countries that would cause an international incident if anyone ever confirmed American operators had set foot there. She'd been a combat medic, a close-quarters weapons specialist, an interrogation resistance instructor who once held out for 9 days under simulated captivity without breaking protocol. She'd been shot twice, stabbed once, blown off her feet by an IED that killed the 2 men standing next to her and left her deaf in her right ear for 6 weeks. And 3 years ago, in a collapsing building outside Aleppo, during a mission to extract a high-value arms dealer, the United States government officially listed her as killed in action. That was a lie. Rear Admiral Jonathan Hayes had pulled her from the rubble 47 minutes after the collapse, medevaced her to a black site in Turkey, spent 3 weeks sitting beside her hospital bed, waiting for her to wake up. And when she finally opened her eyes, the first thing he said was, "Emily, you're dead. And that's the best thing that's ever happened to you." He gave her a choice: come back into the program or disappear. She chose the door. New name, new face, new life. She walked away from everything she'd ever been and tried to become someone ordinary. 3 years later, she was still trying. The morning at Fort Resolute moved fast. Emily handled her patients with a quiet efficiency that made people uncomfortable without understanding why. She changed the dressing on a post-surgical wound so cleanly that the surgical resident observing her actually stepped closer to watch her hands. "Where did you train?" he asked. "Virginia." "Which program?" "A small one. You wouldn't know it." He frowned but let it go. At 9:15 a.m., she caught a medication error on Colonel James Britton's chart. Dr. Alan Mercer had prescribed a morphine dosage that was 15% above the adjusted threshold for the colonel's body weight and kidney function. It wasn't a fatal mistake, but over 48 hours it would have caused respiratory depression. Emily flagged it. Mercer came to the station with his jaw already tight. "You adjusted my prescription?" "I flagged it. The dosage doesn't account for his reduced creatinine clearance. You might want to recalculate." Mercer stared at her. He was mid-40s, well-respected, and not accustomed to being corrected by first-aid nurses. "And you determined this how?" "I read his labs, then I did the math." He held her stare for a long 5 seconds. Then he picked up the chart, looked at the numbers, and his expression changed. Not gratitude, irritation. The kind of irritation that comes from knowing someone is right and wishing they weren't. "I'll adjust it," he said, and walked away without another word. Priya, who had watched the whole exchange from behind a computer screen, leaned over. "He's going to hate you now." "He'll get over it." "No, he won't. He's still mad at a nurse who corrected him in 2019. Emily shrugged. "Then he'll have company." Priya laughed. It was the first time someone at this hospital had laughed because of Emily, not at her, and the warmth of it caught her off guard. She wasn't used to warmth. It felt foreign, like putting on clothes that belonged to someone else. By 10 o'clock, Emily had completed a full mental map of the second floor. She knew every corridor, every stairwell, every door that locked automatically, and every one that didn't. She knew which supply closets were large enough to hold 4 people, and which ones had ventilation ducts wide enough to crawl through. She didn't do this consciously. It was reflex, baked into her nervous system by years of training that had rewired the way her brain processed space and threat. She couldn't walk into a room without cataloging exits. She couldn't sit in a chair without positioning herself to face the door. She couldn't hear a loud noise without calculating distance, direction, and probable source within a half second. It was exhausting, and it was why she couldn't sleep most nights. At 10:20, she walked past the East Corridor and stopped. Two Army MPs stood outside room 714. Full sidearms, body armor under their uniforms, rigid posture, eyes tracking everyone who walked by. Emily recognized the formation immediately. Close protection, high-value asset, federal witness-level security. She didn't stare. She didn't slow down. She kept walking and filed the information in the same mental vault where she stored everything that might kill her later. She didn't know the name of the man behind that door. Gerald Dominic Shaw, former defense contractor, 11 years of funneling classified weapons data to private military corporations operating outside congressional oversight. He had turned federal witness after someone tried to put a car bomb under his Lexus in Georgetown. The FBI moved him to Fort Resolute under the logic that nobody would be reckless enough to hit a hospital next to an Army base. Emily would have told them that logic was a fairy tale if anyone had asked. Nobody asked. At 11 o'clock, she stepped into the break room and found Carl Jessup eating a sandwich and Priya nursing a coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Carl was mid-40s, built heavy, a former college linebacker who traded football for nursing after blowing out his knee. He looked like the kind of man you'd want next to you in a bar fight and a crisis, and the other nurses treated him that way. He looked up when Emily walked in. "You're the one who corrected Mercer. Word travels fast. This is a hospital. Word is the only thing that moves faster than infection." He took a bite of his sandwich. "Sit down. You're making me nervous standing there." Emily sat across from him. Priya slid a coffee toward her. "Peace offering," Priya said, "for surviving your first morning." Emily took it. "Thanks." Carl studied her while he chewed. He had that look, the one Emily had seen from other people who'd been around military culture long enough to recognize its fingerprints, even when they couldn't name them. "You serve?" he asked casually. Emily's heartbeat didn't change. "No." "Huh. Why?" "Way you carry yourself. My brother-in-law did 2 tours with Special Forces. You've got the same, I don't know, stillness. I did a lot of solo hiking in my 20s. Teaches you to stay alert." Carl nodded, but his eyes said he didn't buy it. He was smart enough not to push. Priya jumped in. "So where's home?" "Virginia, originally." "Family?" "Just me." "Boyfriend, girlfriend, cat, anything?" Emily almost smiled. "I had a cactus once. It died." Priya burst out laughing. "Oh my God, how do you kill a cactus?" "Neglect. Turns out even things that survive deserts need someone to pay attention once in a while." She said it like a joke. It wasn't. At 12:15 p.m., Emily passed the east stairwell window and glanced outside. A white utility van sat in the service lot across the street. The logo on the side read, Arizona Regional Electric. She had passed this window 3 times that morning. The van had not been there before noon. She looked at the license plate frame. Rental, not fleet. She looked at the tires. New, not service vehicle rotation. She looked at the windows, tinted darker than state regulation allowed for commercial vehicles. Emily kept walking. Her pulse stayed flat, but a switch somewhere deep in her brain flipped from yellow to orange, and it wasn't going back. At 12:40, Linda Marsh caught her near the supply closet. "Carter, got a minute?" "Sure." Colonel Britton requested a different nurse. Emily tilted her head. "I checked his vitals, changed his dressing, and adjusted his drip. I barely spoke to him." "That's the problem. He says you make him uncomfortable. Says you don't talk. You just appear, do things, and leave like a ghost." "I thought efficiency was the point." Linda sighed. "Efficiency is great, but these are people, not engines. They need to feel like their nurse gives a damn. You don't have to write them a love letter. Just say good morning. Ask about their kids. Pretend to laugh at their jokes. It's not hard." Emily was quiet for a moment. "I'll work on it." Linda softened, just barely. Look, I've been doing this for 31 years. I've seen every kind of nurse walk through these doors. The ones who burn out are the ones who can't connect. You've got the skill. I've never seen hands like yours on a first-day hire, but skill without warmth is just machinery. Let people see you. Let people see you. The words hit something Emily had kept locked for 3 years. The whole point of her new life was to not be seen, to be wallpaper, to be forgettable. And now this woman with reading glasses and a sharp tongue was telling her the opposite. "I hear you," Emily said quietly, and she meant it more than Linda would ever know. Linda nodded once and walked away. Emily stood alone in the hallway. The fluorescent light above her buzzed. The clock on the wall read 12:47. She had 30 minutes of peace left. She just didn't know it yet. At 1:05, Emily was restocking a supply cart near the east corridor when her body registered something before her mind caught up. A pressure change. Subtle. The kind of shift you feel in your sinuses when a large door opens in a sealed building and the air volume adjusts. She stopped, held still, listened. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, too loud, which meant something else had gotten quieter. The background radio chatter from the security station downstairs was gone. Emily set down the box of gauze pads and walked toward the nurse's station. Not fast, not slow. The pace of someone who has already started calculating. Priya looked up from her charting. "What's up?" "Call the front desk." Priya picked up the phone, held it to her ear. Her face changed. "Dead. Try your cell." Priya pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, waited. "No signal. I had full bars like 20 minutes ago." Emily looked down the corridor. One of the MPs outside room 714 was pressing his radio transmit button over and over, his jaw clenching harder each time he got nothing back. Communications jammer, professional grade, probably in that van. Priya was watching Emily's face. "Should I go downstairs and check?" "No." Emily said it fast enough that Priya flinched. "Stay here, stay behind the desk." "Emily, you're scaring me." "Good. Scared people, pay attention." At 1:14, Carl came around the corner with a confused look. "Hey, is the phone system down? I can't reach radiology." "Everything's down," Emily said. "Everything? Like everything, everything?" "Landlines, cell signals, radios, all of it." Carl's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, concern, fear. "That doesn't just happen." "No," Emily said, "it doesn't." She reached under the supply cart and pulled out a small black case that had been taped to the underside of the bottom shelf. She had placed it there at 7:02 that morning during her first walkthrough, while the corridor was empty. She opened the case. Carl saw the gun and his whole body went rigid. "What the hell is that? Emily, what is happening right now?" "Listen to me carefully, both of you." She looked at Carl, then at Priya, whose eyes were already filling with tears. "Something is about to happen in this building. I don't know exactly when, but I need you to take every mobile patient on this floor and move them into the interior supply room at the end of the west corridor. Lock the door from inside. Push the heavy shelving units against it. Do not open that door for anyone. Not security, not police, not a voice you think you recognize. The only voice you open that door for is mine. Do you understand?" Priya was shaking. "How do you know this? Do you understand me, Priya?" Priya nodded. Carl hadn't moved. He was staring at Emily with an expression she had seen before. On the faces of soldiers the first time they realized the person next to them was not what they seemed. "Who are you?" he whispered. Emily loaded the magazine into the Sig Sauer, racked the slide, chambered around. The motion was so fast and fluid, it looked like a reflex, like blinking, like breathing. "I'm the nurse who checks seals twice." At 1:17 p.m., the world split open. The breaching charge hit the front entrance with a concussive blast that shook the building from foundation to roofline. Ceiling tiles cracked. Light fixtures swung. The emergency power kicked in and bathed everything in deep red. Screams erupted from every floor. Emily didn't flinch. Go! Now! Move! Carl grabbed Priya's arm. Priya grabbed the medication cart for balance. They ran. Emily turned toward the east corridor and pressed her back against the wall. She controlled her breathing the way she'd been taught a lifetime ago. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out. The world shrank down to a tunnel, and in that tunnel there was nothing but sound, distance, and time. Boots on tile, heavy, tactical soles, multiple sets, 2-man formation, staggered entry, leapfrogging sectors. She counted the cadence. 10 men, maybe 12. No, 10. The rhythm was too tight for more. The first gunman appeared at the far end of the corridor, rifle up. Night vision flipped onto his helmet. Moving with the confidence of a man who expected no resistance, Emily let him pass. She wanted the second one. He came 4 seconds later, covering the rear, sweeping his rifle in a controlled arc. When he turned away from her position, Emily stepped out from behind a laundry cart, closed the distance in 3 steps, locked his weapon arm, hyperextended the elbow until she felt cartilage pop, stripped the rifle from his grip, and drove her palm into his temple hard enough to shut off the lights behind his eyes. He dropped, silent, done. Emily dragged him behind the cart, pulled the earpiece from his vest, and slipped it into her left ear. The comms channel crackled. Bravo 2, status. Silence. Bravo 2, report. Nothing. A pause. Then a voice, harder now, with the edge of a man who just realized his chessboard had changed. All units. Possible contact. 2nd floor east corridor. Titan formation. Proceed with caution. Emily checked the rifle she'd taken. M4 variant. Suppressed. Custom optics. This wasn't military surplus. This was private contractor hardware, the kind of equipment that costs more than most people's houses and doesn't exist on any inventory list. Whoever sent these men had money, connections, and enough arrogance to attack a hospital 7 miles from a United States Army base. Down the hall, 2 suppressed gunshots cracked in rapid succession. The MPs at room 714 were engaging. Emily didn't move toward the sound. She moved toward the stairwell above it, because the best way to stop an ambush isn't to charge into the middle of it. It's to become one. She hit the stairwell at 118 and took the steps 2 at a time, weapon up, back brushing the wall. The earpiece fed her everything. Their voices, their positions, their plan unraveling 1 thread at a time. Alpha team, ground floor secure, lobby clear, 6 hostages corralled in the main waiting area. Bravo lead, moving on primary target, 2 guards still active outside 714. Charlie, hold the ER exits, nobody leaves. Emily counted the pieces. Alpha had the ground floor. Bravo was heading for the witness. Charlie controlled escape routes. Textbook 3-element assault. Whoever planned this had real training, probably ex-military, probably someone who'd read the same field manuals she'd memorized a decade ago. But manuals don't account for ghosts. She reached the 3rd floor landing and stopped. Through the reinforced glass panel of the stairwell door, she could see an empty corridor stretching toward a maintenance access hallway that ran directly above the ICU wing. She had mapped this route at 7:04 that morning, before her first cup of coffee, before anyone else on staff had even clocked in. Emily pushed through the door and moved fast. The maintenance corridor was narrow, lined with exposed conduit and overhead pipes. Her boots made no sound. 14 steps brought her to a ventilation grate that looked directly down into the 2nd floor ICU hallway. She knelt, pressed her face to the grate, and saw them. 4 men, Bravo team, 2 on each side of the corridor, advancing toward room 714 in a textbook high-low stack. The 2 MPs were crouched behind an overturned medical cart, sidearms drawn, faces tight with controlled terror. They were outgunned, and they knew it. The younger MP, barely 25, had blood running from a cut above his eyebrow where shrapnel from the breaching charge had caught him. "Federal officers," the older MP shouted, "stand down. This facility is under military jurisdiction." Nobody stood down. One of the Bravo operators raised a hand signal, and the team split. 2 pressed forward. 2 peeled left to flank through a connecting hallway. The MPs had maybe 30 seconds before they were boxed. Emily pulled back from the grate and ran. She reached the second maintenance access point 15 meters further down the corridor, dropped to her knees, and kicked the vent cover out with one strike. It clattered to the second-floor hallway below. She went through the opening, feet first, hung by her fingertips for half a second, and dropped. She landed directly behind the 2 flanking operators. The first one heard her boots hit the floor and started to turn. Emily shot him in the back of his right knee. He screamed and crumpled. His partner spun, rifle swinging toward her face. Emily ducked under the barrel, stepped inside his reach, drove the heel of her palm into his nose, and felt bone give way. He staggered backward. She stripped the rifle from his hands, flipped it, and brought the stock across his jaw, so hard his helmet flew off and bounced down the hall. Both men were down. Neither was dead. Emily didn't kill when she didn't have to. Not anymore. Not if she could help it. But the noise had done its job. The 2 remaining Bravo operators abandoned their advance on 714 and swung toward her position. She was already gone, moving low along the wall, slipping behind a portable X-ray unit parked outside an empty room. "Bravo lead, we have contact. Repeat, contact on second floor, ICU East. 2 men down, single shooter." The voice that came back was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that only comes from command experience. Description: female, hospital scrubs, moved like Bravo lead. She moved like one of us. Silence on the channel. A long, heavy silence. Then the command voice spoke again, and this time there was something new in it. Something Emily recognized because she'd spent years putting that exact tone into other people's voices. Doubt. "All units adjust ROE. Treat the female as a primary threat. Weapons free." Emily's jaw tightened. Weapons free meant they'd shoot her on sight. No challenge, no warning. The moment any of them caught a glimpse of blue scrubs, they'd pull the trigger. Fine. She wouldn't be wearing blue scrubs much longer. 1:21 p.m. Emily ducked into room 708, an empty recovery suite. She pulled off her scrub top and grabbed a dark jacket from behind the door, a doctor's windbreaker someone had left hanging on a hook. She put it on, zipped it to her chin, and tucked her blonde hair under the collar. It wasn't a disguise, it was a disruption. When people are looking for blue, you give them black. She caught her reflection in the darkened window. For a split second, she didn't see Emily Carter. She saw Lieutenant Commander Hale staring back at her, hollow-eyed, blood on her hands, standing in a collapsing building in Aleppo, while the ceiling groaned and dust fell like snow. She blinked it away. Not now. She pressed the earpiece deeper and listened. "Alpha lead, ground floor status. Holding 6 hostages secure in the waiting area. 2 staff, 3 patients, 1 child. Repeat, 1 child present." Emily's blood went cold. A child. "Keep them contained. If anyone moves, put a round in the ceiling. If anyone tries to run, put a round in them." She had been treating this as a tactical problem. Angles, numbers, timing. But a child changed the math. A child meant someone downstairs was terrified beyond anything they could process. And terrified people do unpredictable things. And unpredictable things get people killed. Emily pushed the emotion down. She'd deal with it later. Right now, she had 8 remaining threats, a witness she'd never met, 2 wounded MPs who were running low on ammunition, and a building full of innocent people who had woken up this morning thinking it was just another Tuesday. She moved out of 708 and back into the hallway. The 2 Bravo operators she'd been tracking were no longer advancing towards 714. They'd fallen back to a defensive position near the ICU junction, covering both approaches with overlapping fields of fire. Smart, they'd stopped trying to complete the mission and started trying to find her. That was exactly what she wanted. 1:24 p.m. Emily worked her way through connecting corridors toward the east side of the building, away from the ICU, away from the remaining Bravo operators, and toward the ground floor stairwell. If Alpha had 6 hostages in the waiting area, that was the priority. The witness in 714 was protected by 2 armed MPs behind a heavy door. The hostages downstairs had nothing. She reached the stairwell and paused. She could hear movement below. One set of boots, pacing, a guard posted at the base of the stairs. Emily holstered the pistol and drew the folding knife from her waistband. She opened it silently, held it reversed against her forearm, and descended. The guard was at the bottom of the stairs, rifle slung across his chest, back partially turned. He was young, early 20s. The tattoo on his neck was fresh, military style, the kind operators got after their first deployment. Emily felt something twist in her stomach. This kid had probably been a soldier once, probably served his country, and now he was standing in a hospital pointing weapons at civilians because somebody with money and connections had offered him enough to cross every line that mattered. She didn't feel sorry for him, but she noticed. She came down the last 4 steps in complete silence, hooked her left arm around his neck, locked the choke, and squeezed. He thrashed. His hands clawed at her forearm. She held tight, controlled, counting the seconds. At 7, his body went limp. She lowered him to the floor, zip-tied his wrists with a strap from his own tactical vest, and took his rifle. That was 3 down, 7 left. She pressed her back against the stairwell wall and listened to the earpiece. Charlie 2, East exit secure, no movement. Charlie 1, ER bay secure, loading dock sealed. Alpha lead, ground floor holding, hostages compliant, awaiting Bravo's extraction of the primary target. Bravo lead, a pause, heavy breathing. Bravo is compromised. 2 men down on second floor, requesting backup from Alpha. Another pause, then the command voice again. Negative, Alpha holds the ground floor. Bravo, complete your mission with remaining assets. Backup is not coming. Sir, you don't understand. This isn't hospital security. There's a shooter in here who just disabled 2 of my operators in under 10 seconds. Then find her and kill her. That's an order. Emily filed the exchange away. The command voice wasn't inside the building. He was outside, probably in that van, running the operation remotely. That meant 10 shooters inside and at least 1 coordinator outside. And it meant they had eyes she hadn't found yet. She looked up. There, mounted on the ceiling above the stairwell door, a small wireless camera recently installed, the adhesive still shiny. They had wired the building before the assault. They'd been here before today, probably posing as maintenance or electrical workers, planting cameras and mapping the layout. This wasn't a raid. This was a siege that had been planned for weeks. Emily reached up, grabbed the camera, and crushed it in her fist. Let him see that. 1:29 p.m. She pushed through the ground floor stairwell door and entered a back corridor that ran behind the main waiting area. Through a service window, she could see them. 3 Alpha operators spread across the waiting room, rifles trained on 6 hostages sitting on the floor with their hands on their heads. An elderly man in a veteran's cap, his hands trembling so badly his fingers couldn't stay laced. A young woman in scrubs, clutching a purse to her chest like a shield. A maintenance worker with his eyes squeezed shut, lips moving in silent prayer. A mother and a boy. He was maybe 7 years old. He sat pressed against his mother's side, face buried in her arm, his small body shaking with sobs he was trying to silence. His mother had one hand on his head and the other raised in the air, and the look on her face was the worst thing Emily had seen since Aleppo. Not fear, resignation. The face of a woman who had already accepted that she might watch her son die, and there was nothing she could do about it. Emily's training said, stay tactical, Prioritize the mission. Eliminate threats in order of strategic value. Emily's heart said something else entirely. She studied the three operators. One near the main entrance, covering the blown-open doors. One in the center of the room, standing over the hostages. One near the reception desk, watching the interior corridors. 3 targets, open space, minimal cover. If she engaged from here and missed even one shot, those hostages would be in the crossfire. She needed a different angle. She pulled back from the service window and moved along the back corridor until she reached the utility closet adjacent to the waiting area. She opened it, stepped inside, and found what she was looking for: the electrical panel for the ground floor. Emily flipped the main breaker. The ground floor went black. Screams erupted from the waiting area. The operators activated weapon-mounted lights, creating narrow beams that cut through the darkness, but also created tunnel vision and made them visible targets. Emily came through the service door low and fast. The operator near the reception desk saw her light-mounted beam sweeping past him and turned. Too late. Emily fired once, center mass. He went down hard, his rifle clattering across the floor. The second operator, the one standing over the hostages, spun toward the sound, but his weapon light was blinding him, creating glare off every reflective surface in the room. Emily closed the distance in 4 strides, grabbed his rifle barrel with her left hand, redirected it toward the ceiling, and fired her pistol with her right hand at contact range. He fell. The third operator at the entrance had cover behind a concrete pillar. He opened fire. 2 rounds snapped past Emily's head, close enough to feel the heat. She dove behind the reception desk, rolled once, came up on one knee, and waited. He fired again, 3 rounds punching through the desk's thin composite wood. Emily tracked the muzzle flashes, timed the rhythm of his trigger pull, and in the half-second gap between his third and fourth shot, she leaned out and fired twice. Both rounds found him. He slumped against the pillar and slid to the floor. Silence. Then the boy screamed, not in fear, in release. The kind of scream that comes when the thing you were holding inside finally breaks free and you can't stop it and you don't want to. His mother pulled him tighter and began rocking, her whole body shaking, tears streaming down her face. Emily stood up from behind the desk. She looked at the hostages, 6 faces staring at her in the darkness, lit only by the fallen operator's weapon lights rolling slowly across the floor. "Is anyone hurt?" Emily asked. Nobody spoke. "I need you to listen to me. I need all of you to stand up and move toward the back corridor behind me. There is a stairwell at the end of that corridor. Go up 1 flight, turn left. 3rd door on the right is a large supply room. There are people inside. Knock 3 times and tell them Emily sent you." The elderly veteran was the first to move. He stood on shaking legs, adjusted his cap, and looked at Emily with an expression she would carry for the rest of her life. "Navy?" he said. Emily met his eyes. "Yes, sir." He nodded once, a nod that held 50 years of understanding. Then he turned to the others. "You heard her. On your feet. Let's move." They moved. The mother carried her son. The maintenance worker helped the young nurse in scrubs. The veteran walked last, checking behind him, an old instinct that time had dulled but never erased. As the mother passed Emily, she stopped. She didn't say thank you. She just reached out with her free hand and gripped Emily's arm so hard it hurt. Then she kept walking. Emily stood alone in the dark waiting room. 6 down, 4 left. The 2 Bravo operators on the 2nd floor, the 2 Charlie operators covering the exits. And somewhere outside, the voice in the van. The earpiece crackled. "Alpha, report." Nothing. "Alpha lead, report." Dead air. "Alpha team, respond immediately." Silence stretched across the channel like a held breath. When the command voice spoke again, the doubt Emily had heard earlier had become something sharper, something personal. "All units, fall back to secondary extraction point. Mission is compromised. Repeat, mission is compromised. Evacuate the building." Emily pulled the earpiece out and held it in front of her face. Then she pressed the transmit button. "Nobody's evacuating." The channel went silent. Dead silent. The kind of silence that happens when 10 seconds feel like 10 years, and every person listening suddenly understands that the rules have changed. The command voice came back. Quiet now. Controlled. But underneath the control, she could hear it, the hairline fracture in his composure. "Who is this?" Emily didn't answer. She released the transmit button, put the earpiece back in, and walked toward the stairwell. 1:36 p.m. The two Charlie operators had abandoned their exit positions. She could hear them on comms, voices tight, moving toward each other for mutual support. They were scared. Men who had walked into this building believing they were hunters now understood with absolute clarity that they were prey. Emily reached the second floor and paused at the corridor junction. The emergency red lights still pulsed. Water from the sprinkler system had pooled on the tile, turning the floor into a shallow mirror that reflected every movement, every shadow. She used it. She positioned herself at the far end of the west corridor and watched the reflections on the wet floor. Two figures appeared, moving together, rifles up, clearing room by room as they retreated toward the south stairwell. Emily stepped into the corridor behind them. "Stop!" They spun. Both rifles came up. Emily stood 12 feet away, pistol at her side, not aimed, not threatening, just present. "Your team is done," she said. "6 of your men are down. Your comms coordinator knows it. He just ordered you to evacuate, but the exits you were guarding are the same exits I now control." The operator on the left, heavy-set, mid-30s, breathing hard, adjusted his grip on the rifle. His finger was on the trigger. His eyes were calculating. "You've got about 5 seconds to decide how this ends," Emily continued. "You can drop your weapons, get on the floor, and be alive when the army shows up. Or you can try to shoot me, and I promise you, one of you will get a round off, but neither of you will walk out of this building." The operator on the right was younger. Emily could see it in his face. He didn't want to die in a hospital hallway. He didn't want to die at all. His rifle was trembling. "Easy call," Emily said softly. "Drop it." The younger one broke first. His rifle clattered to the wet floor. He put his hands up and sank to his knees, and the sound that came out of him was something between a gasp and a sob. The older one held for 3 more seconds, his eyes locked on Emily's, reading her, measuring her, looking for bluff. He didn't find any. His rifle hit the floor. Emily zip-tied both men with her own restraints and left them kneeling in the corridor. She took their radios and their sidearms and moved toward the ICU. 2 left. The Bravo operators near 714. The earpiece had gone quiet. No more commands from the van. No more status reports. The silence told Emily everything. The coordinator had either fled or gone dark, cutting his losses, abandoning his men the way people like him always did when the math stopped working in their favor. 1:41 p.m. Emily rounded the corner toward room 714 and stopped. One of the MPs was down, slumped against the wall, hand pressed to his left side, blood seeping between his fingers. His partner was crouched beside him, one hand on the wound, the other holding a pistol aimed down the corridor. The 2 Bravo operators were 20 meters away, pressed against opposite walls, using patient rooms as cover. A standoff, neither side willing to move. Emily approached from the Bravo operator's blind side. She was 4 meters away when one of them caught movement in his peripheral vision and turned. He recognized her, not from the hallway 30 minutes ago, not from the scrubs or the jacket or the gun. He recognized her face. His expression collapsed. The blood drained out of his skin so fast it looked like someone had pulled a plug. His rifle lowered an inch, just 1 inch. But an inch was a lifetime. "Oh, God," he whispered, "it's you." Emily didn't blink. "Put the weapon down. You're dead. You died in Syria. We were briefed. They told us you were..." I said put it down. His partner was confused, looking between them, trying to understand why a man he'd fought beside for years had suddenly turned white as paper. The first operator's hands were shaking now. He looked at Emily the way people look at something that shouldn't exist, but does. A reckoning standing in a hospital corridor, wearing a stolen jacket and holding a gun. They sent us for Shaw, he said, his voice cracking. But when they briefed us on hospital personnel, your photo was in the file. They said you were a bonus target. They said to confirm the kill if we had the opportunity. Emily's stomach dropped. Not because she was surprised, because she'd suspected it from the moment she heard the breaching charge and recognized the sound. Someone had found her. Someone knew Emily Carter was Emily Hale. And someone had decided that extracting a federal witness was the perfect cover for tying up a loose end that had been walking around Arizona in nurses' scrubs. Who sent you? Emily asked. The operator shook his head. I don't know the name. The contract came through 3 layers. But the intel package was military grade. Personnel files, floor plans, your shift schedule. Whoever wants you dead has access to systems that don't exist on any public server. Emily processed this in the time it took to draw one breath. Someone inside the defense establishment, someone with classified access, someone who knew about the program that created her and wanted every trace of it erased. Put your weapons on the floor, she said. Both of you, now. They did. Emily kicked the weapons behind her and moved toward the wounded MP. She knelt beside him, pulled his hand away from the wound, and assessed. Through and through, left lateral abdomen, bleeding steady but not arterial. He'd live if he got pressure and fluids within the hour. You're going to be fine, she told him, already pulling gauze from a supply rack on the wall. Keep pressure here, firm, don't let go. The unwounded MP stared at her. Ma'am, who the hell are you? Emily packed the wound, wrapped it tight, and stood up. She didn't answer him. She didn't need to. From somewhere far outside the building, beyond the parking lot, beyond the desert road, a sound rose through the silence. Low at first, then building. A deep, rhythmic thunder that Emily knew better than her own heartbeat. Helicopters, Army Blackhawks, coming fast. Emily walked to the window at the end of the corridor and looked out. 3 Blackhawks coming low over the desert floor, dust tornadoes swirling beneath their rotors. Behind them, a convoy of military vehicles racing up the access road, lights flashing, armed soldiers visible in the back of every truck. The cavalry was coming. 7 minutes too late to save anyone, but just in time to find a hospital full of neutralized gunmen and a rookie nurse standing in a blood-streaked corridor with a pistol in her hand and a look on her face that made every soldier who saw it take one instinctive step backward. Emily lowered the weapon. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, she let herself breathe. The Blackhawks touched down at 1:49 p.m., and the building shook like the war had come back for a second round. Within 90 seconds, 36 armed soldiers from the 83rd Military Police Battalion poured through every entrance of Fort Resolute Medical Center, rifles sweeping, boots hammering tile, voices barking commands that bounced off walls, still wet from the sprinklers. Emily stood in the second-floor corridor with her weapon on the floor at her feet and her hands raised. She had placed the pistol down the moment she heard the first boots hit the ground floor. She knew the protocol. She knew what a tactical response team would see when they found a woman standing in a hallway full of unconscious men and spent casings. She knew one wrong twitch would get her killed by the people who were supposed to be saving everyone. On the ground! Now! Hands behind your head. The soldier screaming at her was 23, maybe 24. His rifle was steady, but his voice wasn't. Emily dropped to her knees, laced her fingers behind her skull, and lay flat on the tile without a word. They zip-tied her wrist before anyone asked a single question. That was fine. She expected it. What she didn't expect was what happened 40 seconds later. Get her up! The voice came from behind the line of soldiers, and every one of them stiffened when they heard it. Not because it was loud, because it carried the kind of authority that doesn't need volume. Emily knew that voice. She had heard it in a hospital room in Turkey 3 years ago, telling her she was dead. Rear Admiral Jonathan Hayes walked through the corridor like a man who owned every inch of it. 61 years old, silver hair cut to regulation, dressed blues under a tactical vest that looked borrowed. He moved past the soldiers without acknowledging them, stopped in front of Emily, and looked down at her lying on the wet floor with her hands bound behind her back. "Cut her loose," he said. The soldier standing over Emily hesitated. "Sir, she was found armed in the middle of a hostile—" "I said, cut her loose, Sergeant. That's not a suggestion." The zip tie came off. Emily stood up. She and Hayes looked at each other for 5 seconds without speaking. 5 seconds that held 3 years of silence, a fake death certificate, and a promise that was supposed to keep her safe forever. "You look terrible," Hayes said. "You look old," Emily said. The faintest crack of a smile crossed his face, then vanished. "Briefing room, now. We need to talk before this building fills up with people who are going to have a lot of questions I'd prefer you didn't answer." 1:53 p.m. Hayes commandeered the hospital's administrative conference room on the 3rd floor. He posted 2 of his own men outside the door with orders to let nobody in, not Army, not FBI, not God himself, unless he showed proper identification. Emily sat across from him at a long table still covered with someone's abandoned lunch meeting, cold coffee cups, and a half-eaten box of donuts. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh, almost. Hayes folded his hands on the table and studied her the way he always did, like he was reading a classified file written on her face. 10 men, Emily." "Yes, sir." "You neutralized 10 armed operators in a hospital full of civilians in under 25 minutes. 24 minutes, but who's counting? Anyone killed?" "No. Several will need surgery. 2 have concussions. 1 has a shattered knee that's going to end his career, but nobody died." Hayes leaned back. Something moved behind his eyes that Emily couldn't quite read. Pride, maybe. Or fear. Or some combination that didn't have a name. "The men who attacked this hospital," he said, "what do you know? Private contractors, high-end. The gear was custom, not military surplus. M4 variants with suppressed barrels and private label optics. The comms equipment was encrypted on a rotating frequency that's only available through 3 manufacturers worldwide, all of which have exclusive contracts with intelligence agencies. Whoever bankrolled this operation has access to classified procurement channels." Hayes nodded slowly. "Their target was Gerald Shaw, the witness in 714. Shaw was the stated target, but he wasn't the only one." Hayes stopped nodding. Emily leaned forward. "One of the Bravo operators recognized me, Admiral. Not from today, from before. He said my photo was in their intelligence briefing. He said I was flagged as a bonus target. Someone told these men that Emily Hale was alive, working in this hospital, and that confirming my death was a secondary objective." The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight. Hayes stared at her, and for the first time in all the years she'd known him, Emily saw something she'd never seen on his face before. Fear. Not for himself, for her. "How much did he tell you?" Hayes asked. "Not enough. The contract was layered through multiple cutouts, but the intel package was military grade. Floor plans, personnel files, my shift schedule, Jonathan. Whoever burned me has access to systems that aren't supposed to exist." Hayes closed his eyes. He pressed his thumb and forefinger against the bridge of his nose and held them there for a long time. 3 people knew you were alive, he said quietly. Me, Director Catherine Holt at NSA, and Deputy Secretary Marcus Webb at the Pentagon. Emily felt the floor tilt under her, not physically, but somewhere inside her chest, in the place where she stored the few things she still trusted. "You're telling me one of those 3 people sold me out?" I'm telling you, it's the only explanation that fits the evidence. And Shaw? How does he connect? Hayes opened his eyes. Shaw was a defense contractor who spent 11 years funneling weapon specifications to private military firms. When he turned witness, he gave the FBI 17 names: executives, lobbyists, Pentagon officials. 2 of those names were redacted from the final report by someone with enough clearance to reach into a classified federal file and erase whatever they wanted. Who redacted them? That's what I've been trying to find out for the past 8 months. And that's why I'm here today, Emily. I didn't come because of the attack. I was already on my way. I received intelligence 4 days ago that your cover had been compromised. I was coming to pull you out. Emily's hands went flat on the table. 4 days. You knew for 4 days and you didn't warn me. I couldn't. My communications are being monitored. Every call I make, every email, every text, someone inside my own chain of command is watching me. If I had contacted you directly, it would have confirmed your location to the people who were already planning this. So you let me walk into a hospital that was about to be attacked. I moved as fast as I could without exposing the operation. I had a team en route. We were 12 minutes out when the breach happened. 12 minutes. People almost died in those 12 minutes, Jonathan. A 7-year-old boy sat on the floor with a rifle in his face for 12 minutes. Hayes didn't flinch. He absorbed it the way old commanders absorb things, with the full weight of knowing that the distance between a good decision and a catastrophe is sometimes measured in seconds you couldn't buy back. You're right, he said, and I will carry that. Emily stared at him. The anger didn't leave, but it shifted, settled, became something harder and more useful. What do you need from me? She asked. Right now? I need you to disappear again. New identity, new location. We can have you relocated within 48 hours. No, Hayes blinked. Emily, I've been hiding for 3 years. I changed my name. I changed my face. I buried everything I was and tried to become a person who checks blood pressure and smiles at old men who complain about their IV beeps. And it wasn't enough. They found me anyway. Running again doesn't solve anything. It just delays the next time someone walks into a building full of innocent people because of me. What are you proposing? I'm proposing we find out who burned me. Not in 8 months, not through back channels and careful inquiries. Now, before whoever ordered this attack has time to cover their tracks and send another team. Hayes studied her for a long time. You know what that means. It means I stop hiding. It means you become a target again, officially. I've been a target since the moment someone put my photo in that briefing package. The only difference is, now I know it. 2:07 p.m. The 3rd floor corridor was filling with people Emily didn't want to see. FBI agents in windbreakers. Army CID investigators with notepads. A woman in a charcoal suit who moved like she ran something important and didn't care who knew it. Hayes intercepted the woman before she reached the conference room. Emily watched through the glass partition as they spoke in low voices, their body language telling a story words couldn't. Hayes was standing his ground. The woman was pushing, hard. When Hayes came back in, his expression had changed. That was Colonel Diana Voss, Army Criminal Investigation Division. She wants to interview you. No, she's not asking. She has jurisdictional authority over any violent incident on or near a military installation. Technically, she can compel your cooperation. Technically, I don't exist. You can't compel a dead woman. Hayes almost smiled. I made that argument. She was not impressed. What does she know? That a civilian nurse somehow neutralized 10 armed attackers. That the nurse appears to have tactical training inconsistent with her personnel file. And that a rear admiral showed up personally within an hour of the incident, which suggests the nurse isn't a nurse. How much are you going to tell her? As little as possible. But Emily, we're going to need help. What happened today isn't going to stay contained. There are too many witnesses, too many cameras. By tonight, this will be on every news channel in the country, And by tomorrow, every intelligence agency in the world will be trying to figure out who you are. Emily looked out the window at the desert stretching endlessly toward the horizon. 3 years ago, she had stood in a different room with a different view and made a choice to disappear. She had believed, truly believed, that she could become someone small enough to go unseen. She had been wrong. Then we move fast, she said. 2:14 p.m. Emily walked out of the conference room and into chaos. The second floor was swarming with investigators, medical personnel triaging the wounded operators, and military police documenting every bullet hole and bloodstain. Somewhere downstairs, the hostages were being interviewed. Somewhere outside, reporters were already gathering behind the police perimeter. She was halfway to the stairwell when she heard her name. Emily! She turned. Priya Anand came running down the corridor, face streaked with dried tears, scrubs stained with someone else's blood. She hit Emily with a hug so fierce it nearly knocked her backward. You're alive! Oh my God, you're alive! Carl said you went out there with a gun, and I was sure you were. Emily stood rigid for a moment. Physical contact was something she trained herself to tolerate, not welcome. But Priya was shaking against her, and something ancient and human overrode the conditioning. Emily put one arm around her and held on. I'm fine. Priya pulled back, tears fresh. Fine? You're fine? Emily, what happened out there? Carl said there were soldiers and explosions and you just walked into it like what? Like you've done it before. Emily didn't answer. She didn't have to. Carl appeared behind Priya, his big frame filling the corridor. He looked at Emily with an expression that had traveled a long distance since this morning, from suspicion to confusion to something that lived right next door to awe. Everyone's safe, he said. All the patients from our floor. The supply room held. Nobody got in. Good. The mother and her boy from downstairs. They came up the stairwell like you told them to. The kid was screaming. We brought them inside. Carl paused. Emily, who are you? Before she could answer, Linda Marsh came around the corner. She walked right up to Emily, stopped, and looked at her the way you look at something you've been staring at for hours and only now see clearly. I told you this morning that you needed to let people see a person, Linda said. Turns out I was the one who wasn't seeing. Emily met her eyes. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. Don't you dare apologize to me. I just watched 3 Army investigators try to piece together how one woman took down 10 armed men. One of them actually used the word impossible. Linda's voice cracked just slightly before she pulled it back. Whatever you are, Carter, you saved everyone in this building today. Every single person. Emily felt the words hit somewhere she wasn't ready for them to land. She had spent 3 years building walls so high that nothing could reach her. And in the span of one afternoon, a sharp-tongued head nurse, a nervous young woman, and a linebacker who made sandwiches had found cracks she didn't know existed. I need to go, Emily said quietly. There are people I need to talk to. Are you coming back? Priya asked, and the way she asked it, hopeful and terrified at the same time, told Emily that the question wasn't about work schedules. I don't know, Emily said. It was the most honest thing she'd said all day. 2:23 p.m. Hayes was waiting for her in the parking lot, standing beside a black SUV with tinted windows and government plates. 2 armed escorts stood at the vehicle's doors. Behind them, the hospital looked like a wound. Broken entrance, emergency vehicles, yellow tape, a building that would never feel safe again. Emily stopped 10 feet from the SUV. Before I get in that vehicle, I need you to answer one question. Ask. Catherine Holt and Marcus Webb, you said they were the only other people who knew I was alive. Do you trust either of them? Hayes was quiet for a moment. I trust Catherine with my life. I've known her for 30 years. And Webb? Hayes didn't answer immediately. The hesitation was small, barely a breath, but Emily caught it the way she caught everything. Webb was appointed 18 months ago, Hayes said carefully. He came from the private sector, defense consulting. He has connections to firms that operate in spaces where oversight is minimal. Firms like the ones Shaw was funneling weapons data to? Hayes met her eyes. I can't make that accusation without evidence. But you're thinking it. I'm thinking a lot of things, Emily, and most of them keep me up at night. Emily looked back at the hospital one last time. Through a second-floor window, she could see Priya standing in the corridor, watching her. Priya raised one hand, a small wave, hesitant like a child watching someone leave and not knowing if they'd come back. Emily turned away. She got in the SUV. 2:31 p.m. The vehicle pulled onto the desert highway heading east. Hayes sat beside her in the back seat, a secure laptop open on his knees. Emily stared out the window at the flat, endless landscape passing at 70 miles per hour. But her mind was running at a speed the desert couldn't match. The operators I interrogated, she said without looking at Hayes. The one who recognized me. He said the contract was layered through 3 cutouts. That's standard for deniable operations, which means whoever commissioned this used protocols they learned inside the intelligence community. This wasn't a contractor going rogue. This was someone using the system they helped build. Agreed. Shaw's testimony named 17 people. 2 names were redacted. If we find out who redacted those names, we find the person who ordered today's attack. The redaction was made at the deputy secretary level or above. That narrows it to a very small list. It narrows it to Webb. It could be Webb. It could be someone Webb answers to. It could be someone who compromised Webb's credentials and made the redaction without his knowledge. We don't have enough to move yet. Emily finally looked at him. People almost died today, Jonathan. A child almost died. We don't have the luxury of yet. And if we move too fast and tip our hand, whoever is behind this will burn every piece of evidence and disappear. These people have been operating inside the defense establishment for years. They know how to cover their tracks. If we're going to expose them, we need to be surgical. Surgical, Emily laughed, short and hard. That's the word the Bravo team leader used to describe their operation. Surgical extraction. You know what surgical means in their world? It means killing everyone who isn't the target and calling it clean. Hayes closed the laptop. He turned to face her fully, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked not like an admiral, but like a tired man carrying something too heavy to hold alone. I owe you something, he said, and I've owed it for 3 years. Emily waited. When I pulled you out of that building in Aleppo, I told you the best thing that ever happened to you was dying. I told you disappearing would keep you safe. He paused. I was wrong. Hiding didn't protect you. It isolated you. It stripped away everything that made you strong, your team, your purpose, your identity, and left you alone in a world that felt like someone else's life. And today, when those men came through that door, the woman who stopped them wasn't Emily Carter, the nurse. It was Emily Hale, the operator, the woman I tried to bury. Emily's throat tightened. She didn't speak. I'm not going to ask you to disappear again, Hayes said. I'm going to ask you to come back. Not to the SEALs, not to combat, but to something that needs you more. What? There are 47 combat medics graduating from the Naval Special Warfare Medical Pipeline next month. Youngest class we've ever trained. Brilliant, brave, and completely unprepared for what happens when a mission goes sideways and there's no backup coming, and the only thing standing between a room full of civilians and a team of killers is whatever you've got left inside you. Emily stared at him. They need an instructor, Hayes said. Someone who's lived it. Someone who knows what it feels like to stand alone in a building full of people trying to kill you and choose, in that moment, to protect strangers instead of yourself. You want me to teach. I want you to build something. A training program that doesn't exist yet. One that prepares medical operators for the scenarios nobody wants to admit are coming. Hospital attacks, infrastructure targets, mass casualty events in civilian spaces. The battlefield isn't overseas anymore, Emily. It walked into your hospital today. Emily looked down at her hands. There was blood under her fingernails. Not hers. The MP's blood from when she'd packed his wound. I'm not a teacher, she said. You weren't a nurse either. And yet every person in that building is alive because of what you did today. The SUV hummed down the highway. The desert stretched out in every direction, vast and empty and indifferent to everything that had happened in the last 3 hours. Emily closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids, she saw the boy pressing his face into his mother's arm. She saw the elderly veteran standing up on shaking legs and saying, "You heard her. Let's move." She saw Priya's hand raised in a small wave through a hospital window. She saw all the people who survived today because someone was in the right place with the right training at the right time. And she thought about the next hospital, the next school, the next building full of people who never signed up for war but got it anyway. If I do this, she said, eyes still closed, it's on my terms. Name them. No press, no publicity, no medal ceremony. My identity stays classified. The medics I train will never know my real name, my real history, or what happened today. They'll know me only as their instructor, nothing more. Done. And one more thing. What? Emily opened her eyes. I want access to Shaw's full testimony, the unredacted version. Every name, every connection, every dollar that flowed through those private military firms. If someone inside our own government tried to kill me today, I'm going to find out who, and I'm going to make sure they spend the rest of their life in a cell so small they can't lie down. Hayes looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded. I'll make the call. Emily turned back to the window. The desert was turning gold as the afternoon sun dropped lower, painting everything in a light that made the emptiness look almost beautiful. She thought about what Linda Marsh had said that morning, a lifetime ago. Let people see a person. Emily had spent 3 years trying to be invisible. Today she'd been seen, not just by the men who tried to kill her, but by the people she'd saved. By Priya and Carl and Linda. By the mother who grabbed her arm so hard it hurt. By the old veteran who looked at her and said one word that held everything. Navy. She couldn't go back to being invisible. She wasn't sure she wanted to. The SUV turned off the highway toward a secure military airfield, and Emily watched the hospital disappear in the side mirror, getting smaller and smaller until it was just a speck against the desert. A tiny building that had held, for 24 minutes, more courage than most people see in a lifetime. She didn't look away until it was gone. The secure military airfield sat 40 miles east of Fort Resolute, and by the time the SUV rolled through the checkpoint, Emily had already memorized the guard rotation, the camera positions, and the distance from the gate to the nearest structure with solid walls. She hated that her brain still worked this way. She hated that she couldn't ride in a car without mapping escape routes. She hated all of it, and she knew she would never stop. Hayes led her into a low, concrete building that looked like it had been built during the Cold War and forgotten by every budget cycle since. Inside, a communications room had been hastily converted into a temporary operations center. 3 monitors, 2 encrypted laptops, a secure satellite phone sitting on a folding table like it was waiting for someone to pick it up and end someone's career. A woman was already seated at the table. Emily recognized her from photographs and classified briefings she'd read years ago, back when she still had clearance high enough to see faces that never appeared in public. Catherine Holt, director of a signals intelligence division at NSA that officially didn't have a name. Late 50s, silver-streaked hair pulled into a knot so tight it looked painful. Eyes that processed information the way a machine processes code, fast, cold, and without sentiment. Holt stood when Emily entered. She didn't extend her hand. She didn't smile. She looked at Emily the way an engineer looks at a bridge after an earthquake, checking for structural damage. Lieutenant Commander Hale, Holt said, Or do you prefer Carter? I prefer to know why I'm here instead of in a hospital treating patients. Holt glanced at Hayes. You weren't exaggerating. I never exaggerate about her, Hayes said. 3:42 p.m. Holt sat back down and opened one of the laptops. She turned it to face Emily. On the screen was a photograph of a man in his mid-50s, silver temples, expensive suit, the kind of jaw that looked like it had been engineered for podiums and press conferences. Marcus Webb, Holt said, Deputy Secretary of Defense, appointed 18 months ago after a 22-year career in private defense consulting. Before his government appointment, he sat on the boards of 4 private military firms, 2 of which appear in Gerald Shaw's testimony. Emily looked at the photo. Webb had the face of a man who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. She had seen that face on men in Washington, in boardrooms, in classified briefings where people made decisions that ended lives and called it strategy. Is he the one who burned me? Emily asked. We don't know yet, Holt said, but I can tell you what we do know. 8 months ago, Admiral Hayes brought me evidence that someone had accessed your classified personnel file. The real one. The one stored in a compartmented archive that requires biometric authentication from one of 3 authorized individuals. The access log showed a query at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday using credentials registered to my office. Emily's stomach tightened. Your credentials? My credentials, which I did not use, because at 2:17 a.m. on that Tuesday, I was in a SCIF in Fort Meade briefing the Director of National Intelligence on an unrelated matter with 9 witnesses in a security log that confirms my presence. Someone spoofed your authentication. Someone cloned my biometric profile with enough fidelity to bypass a system that is supposed to be impossible to clone. That requires access to raw biometric data stored on servers that only 3 facilities in the country maintain. One of those facilities is operated by a private contractor called Meridian Defense Solutions. Emily felt the pieces click together like rounds loading into a magazine. And Meridian is one of the firms Webb sat on the board of. Correct, Hayes stepped forward. It gets worse. After Catherine's credentials were used to access your file, there was a second query 14 minutes later. This one pulled the personnel records of every operator assigned to your unit during the Syria operation. Names, cover identities, current locations, all of it. Emily's blood went cold. Not a chill, not a shiver, a deep, absolute freezing that started in her chest and radiated outward until her fingertips went numb. How many people were in my unit? She asked, even though she already knew the answer. 12, including you. How many are still alive? The silence that followed was the loudest sound Emily had ever heard. Hayes looked at Holt. Holt looked at the table. Neither of them spoke for 4 seconds that felt like 4 years. 7, Hayes said finally. 3 died in the original operation in Syria. You were listed as the 4th. Of the remaining 8 who survived and were given new identities, 3 have died in the last 14 months. 1 in a car accident in Montana that local police ruled mechanical failure. 1 in a house fire in Virginia that investigators called electrical. 1 who simply disappeared from his home in Oregon and has not been seen since. Emily's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table to stop them and looked Hayes dead in the eyes. They're hunting us. They're hunting all of us. Yes. And you've known this for how long? I confirmed the pattern 11 weeks ago. 11 weeks? Emily's voice was barely above a whisper, but the heat in it could have melted steel. 11 weeks you knew someone was systematically killing members of my team, and you didn't tell me. You didn't warn any of us. I couldn't confirm the threat without exposing the investigation. If Webb or whoever is behind this learned that we were aware of the pattern, they would have accelerated the timeline and eliminated every remaining target before we could act. So you let 3 people die to protect an investigation. Hayes took it. He didn't deflect. He didn't explain. He absorbed the accusation like a man who had already convicted himself. "Yes," he said, "and I will answer for that, but not today. Today we have 5 surviving members of your unit, including you, and every one of them is in danger." Emily pushed back from the table and stood. She paced 3 steps, stopped, turned. "Names, where are they?" Holt pulled up a second screen. Staff Sergeant David Coe, currently working as a high school PE teacher in Colorado Springs under the name David Kim. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Green, employed as an EMT in Jacksonville, Florida, under the name Marcus Grant. Chief Petty Officer Alejandra Vargas, living in San Diego, working at a veterans nonprofit under her real first name. And Senior Chief James Doyle, who retired to a ranch in Montana, 17 miles from where the first accidental death occurred. Emily's breath caught. Doyle is 17 miles from a kill site and nobody's pulled him out? "We sent a team to contact him this morning. He wasn't at the ranch. His truck is gone. His phone is disconnected. He ran. Or he was taken." "No," Emily shook her head with absolute certainty. "Doyle doesn't get taken. If he's gone, he smelled trouble and moved. He's the most paranoid operator I've ever worked with. He probably had a go-bag packed before the rest of us even knew we were in danger. Can you find him?" Doyle and I had a protocol. We set it up during the Syria operation in case we were ever separated behind enemy lines. A dead-drop communication method using public library bulletin boards in 3 specific cities. It's analog, no electronics, no digital trail. If he's alive and running, he'll leave a marker. Holt and Hayes exchanged a look. "What about the others?" Emily asked. "Coe, Green, Vargas, have they been warned?" "We're making contact now, secure channels." "But Emily, these people have been living civilian lives for 3 years. They built families, careers. They're not operators anymore." "They were never not operators. You can give someone a new name and a new address, but you can't unwire what's been wired. Every one of them sleeps with a weapon within reach. Every one of them sits with their back to the wall. Every one of them knows, somewhere in the back of their mind, that the normal life they're living is borrowed time." Emily paused. "I know because I'm one of them." 4:11 p.m. Holt pulled up a third file on the laptop. "There's something else you need to see." The screen showed a financial document, dense with numbers, routing codes, and corporate names that meant nothing to a civilian, but everything to someone who had spent years tracing arms networks. This is from Shaw's testimony, the unredacted version, which Admiral Hayes secured 2 hours ago through a channel I'm not going to describe. Shaw identified 2 names that were removed from the final FBI report. The first is Richard Calder, former CEO of Meridian Defense Solutions. Webb's company, former company. Calder retired last year and has been living in the Cayman Islands. The second name, Holt paused. She looked at Emily with an expression that contained something Emily had never seen from a woman this composed. Reluctance. The second name is Rear Admiral Peter Ashworth. Emily stopped breathing. "No," she said. "Emily," Hayes started. "No. Ashworth commanded our task force in Syria. He was the one who planned the operation. He was the one who sent us into that building. He was at my funeral, Jonathan. He stood in front of a flag-draped coffin and gave a speech about sacrifice in honor, and he had tears in his eyes." "People cry for many reasons," Holt said quietly. "Guilt is one of them." Emily felt the room spin, not from shock, from the specific kind of vertigo that comes when something you built your entire identity on shifts beneath your feet, and you realize the foundation was never solid. Ashworth had been more than a commanding officer. He had been the closest thing Emily had to a father figure in the military. He had hand-selected her for the classified SEAL program. He had personally overseen her training. He had sat in the briefing room the night before the Syria operation, looked her in the eye and said, "You come back. That's an order." She didn't come back. and he had cried at her funeral. And now his name was on a list of people who had been selling weapons data to private military firms that hired mercenaries to attack hospitals. "How deep is he in it?" Emily asked. Her voice sounded like someone else's. According to Shaw, Ashworth facilitated the initial contacts between the Pentagon and Meridian. He provided classified intelligence assessments that allowed private firms to bid on contracts they shouldn't have known existed. And when the Syria operation disrupted one of the key arms pipelines, Ashworth was the one who provided the target list to the people who wanted it rebuilt. "The target list," Emily repeated. "You mean us?" He gave them our names. Shaw's testimony indicates that Ashworth provided personnel identifiers for every operator involved in the disruption. At the time, it was framed as a routine after-action debrief. Nobody questioned why a rear admiral wanted detailed records of a classified special operations unit. Emily sat back down. She put her elbows on the table and pressed her palms against her eyes. In the darkness behind her hands, she saw Ashworth's face. Not the face from Shaw's testimony, the face from 6 years ago, standing on the deck of a carrier in the Persian Gulf, shaking her hand after she completed SEAL qualification. "I'm proud of you," he had said, "more than you know." She had believed him. She opened her eyes. They were dry. She wouldn't give this moment tears. "Where is Ashworth now?" she asked. "Active duty, currently assigned to the Pentagon in a senior advisory role, reporting directly to the Secretary of Defense. Which means he has access to everything: communications, personnel files, operational plans. If he's the one feeding information to Meridian, he can see every move we make before we make it." "That's the problem," Hayes said. "And that's why we've kept this investigation to 3 people. Me, Catherine, and now you. We need more than 3 people to take down a rear admiral with Pentagon access and a private military network." "Agreed. Which brings me to what I'm about to ask you, and I need you to hear the full request before you respond." Emily looked at him. "Go ahead. I want you to go to Washington." The words landed like a grenade with a delayed fuse. "I want you to attend a classified briefing at the Pentagon in 6 days. The briefing is on the future of combat medical training for Special Operations Forces. I've arranged for you to be there as a consultant, under your Emily Carter identity, with credentials that will hold up to standard verification." "You want me to walk into the Pentagon? The building where the man who is trying to kill me works. I want you within arm's reach of Ashworth, not to confront him, not to accuse him. I want you to look him in the eye and let me watch his reaction when he sees a woman he believes is dead." Emily understood. It was an interrogation technique she'd used herself. You don't ask the suspect questions. You show them something impossible and watch their body betray every secret their mouth would never tell. And if he panics, then we have our confirmation. And Catherine will have the legal grounds to initiate a formal counterintelligence investigation with NSA authority. And if he doesn't panic, what if he's good enough to hold his composure? Then we escalate. Shaw's testimony gives us financial trails. Catherine's team has been tracing the biometric clone, and the 10 men you took down today are currently sitting in military custody, and at least one of them is going to talk. Emily thought about the Bravo operator who had recognized her, the one whose face went white, the one who said, "They told us you were dead." That man had information, layers of it, and scared men with information were the most valuable currency in the world. 6 days, Emily said. 6 days. What happens to my people in the meantime? Coe, Green, Vargas, Doyle. If Ashworth is monitoring channels, he'll know the attack failed. He'll know I'm alive. He'll accelerate. Catherine has already tasked a protection detail for Coe and Green. Vargas is being moved to a safe house tonight. Doyle, we find Doyle. That's partially on you. Emily nodded. I'll leave for Montana tonight. If Doyle used our protocol, I'll have his location within 48 hours. And then I bring him in, and we start building the case that puts Peter Ashworth and everyone connected to him in a cage they'll never get out of. 4:38 p.m. Emily stepped outside the concrete building and stood alone on the cracked tarmac. The sun was dropping toward the horizon, and the heat was finally breaking. That brief window in the Arizona desert where the air stops punishing you and just holds still. Her phone buzzed. A new phone, given to her by Holt 15 minutes ago, encrypted, untraceable, loaded with a single contact list of 3 numbers. It was a text from an unknown number. She opened it, saw the news. Praying for everyone at Fort Resolute. If you need anything, I'm here. It was signed Priya with a small heart emoji. Emily stared at the message. It had been sent to her old number, the one registered to Emily Carter, which meant Holt's team had rerouted it to the new device. Priya had no idea who she was texting. She just knew that somewhere out there was a nurse who had saved her life, and she wanted that nurse to know someone cared. Emily typed a response, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. She put the phone in her pocket. There would be time for warmth later. Right now, warmth was a luxury she couldn't afford. At 4:52, Hayes came outside. He stood beside her and said nothing for a long time. They watched a C-130 cargo plane taxi across the far end of the airfield, its engines filling the silence with a low, familiar roar. "There's something I didn't say in there," Hayes said finally. "Something Catherine doesn't know." Emily looked at him. "The night before the Syria operation, Ashworth called me, off the record. He told me the mission had been compromised and recommended we abort. I overruled him. I sent your team in anyway because the intelligence window was closing and I believed the asset was worth the risk." Emily felt something cold settle at the base of her spine. "You're telling me Ashworth tried to stop the mission?" "He tried to stop it, and I've spent 3 years wondering why. At the time, I thought it was caution. Now I think it was something else. He knew it was compromised because he was the one who compromised it. If the mission succeeded, the arms pipeline would be disrupted, and his partners at Meridian would lose billions. If the mission failed and the operators were killed, the people who knew the most about the pipeline would be eliminated. Either way, Ashworth needed the operation to go differently than it did. But you sent us in anyway. And you survived, which meant Ashworth had a new problem: living witnesses. Operators who had seen the pipeline infrastructure firsthand and could potentially testify about it. So he spent 3 years cleaning up, systematically, quietly, using private contractors to eliminate the people he once commanded. Emily closed her eyes. The C-130 was taking off now, its engines screaming, the sound shaking through her chest like a second heartbeat. "Jonathan." "Yes." "When I walk into that Pentagon briefing room and Ashworth sees my face, I want to be the one standing closest to him. I want to watch his eyes. I want to see the exact moment he realizes that every secret he's been killing to protect just walked through the door in a borrowed suit." Hayes nodded. "You'll have the seat. And one more thing." "What?" "If this goes wrong, if Ashworth has more reach than we think, and this whole thing comes apart, I need you to promise me something. Get my people out. Coe, Green, Vargas, Doyle, whatever it costs. Whatever lines you have to cross, you owe them that." "I owe them more than that." "Yes, you do." They stood together in the fading light while the C-130 climbed into the sky and disappeared into the purple haze where the desert met the heavens. Emily watched it go and thought about something Linda Marsh had said a lifetime ago, in a hospital that now had bullet holes in its walls and blood on its floors. Let people see a person. Emily wasn't ready for that yet. Maybe she wouldn't be for a long time. But standing here on cracked tarmac with a phone full of encrypted contacts and a mission that could get her killed, she felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Something dangerous, something necessary. Purpose. Not the borrowed purpose of checking blood pressure and counting pills. real purpose. The kind that runs through your bones like electricity and makes you understand why you survived when other people didn't. She had survived because there was still work to do, people to protect, traitors to expose, a system to hold accountable for the lives it had thrown away like spent ammunition. Emily walked back inside the building, sat down at the table across from Catherine Holt, and said 4 words, "Show me everything." And Holt did. Holt's files kept Emily up for 3 straight nights. She read every page of Shaw's unredacted testimony in a windowless room at the airfield, cross-referencing names, dates, and financial transactions until the numbers blurred and the coffee stopped working. She didn't sleep because sleep meant dreams, and dreams meant Aleppo. And Aleppo meant waking up swinging at shadows that weren't there. On the second night, she found what she was looking for. A single wire transfer, $14 million, routed from a Cayman Islands shell company called Trident Horizon Limited through 2 intermediary banks in Cyprus, and finally into the operating account of a private military firm based in Virginia called Blackridge Global. The transfer date was 9 days before the attack on Fort Resolute. The authorization signature on the Cayman side was a digital proxy registered to a corporate officer listed as R. Calder, Richard Calder, former CEO of Meridian Defense Solutions, the man who had sat on the same board as Marcus Webb, the man whose name Shaw had given to the FBI before someone with enough power to reach into a classified federal database erased it. Emily photographed the document, encrypted the image, and sent it to Holt. Then she went to Montana. Day 4, 6:17 a.m. The public library in Kalispell, Montana opened at 7, but Emily was parked across the street by 6. She watched the staff arrive. She watched the early patrons, mostly retirees and a few college students, file through the front door. She waited until 7:14, walked in, and went straight to the community bulletin board near the reference section. It was covered with the usual clutter: yard sale flyers, lost dog notices, a handwritten ad for piano lessons, and in the bottom left corner, pinned under a faded church potluck announcement, a small index card with 3 words written in block letters: "Fishing is good." Emily pulled the card, turned it over. On the back, a series of numbers that meant nothing to anyone except 2 people on Earth. A grid coordinate system she and James Doyle had created during the Syria operation, using a cipher based on the page numbers of a specific paperback novel they had both carried in their go-bags. She decoded it in her head in under a minute. Doyle was 43 miles northwest, in a hunting cabin near the Canadian border. She drove. The road turned from asphalt to gravel to dirt, and the dirt eventually became 2 ruts through dense forest that hadn't seen a maintenance crew in years. Emily killed the headlights for the last mile and crept forward using only ambient light. If Doyle was operating in evasion mode, he would have the approach covered. Tripwires, sound traps, maybe worse. She stopped the car 200 meters from the cabin and got out. She stood in the open, hands visible, and waited. 90 seconds passed. "You got old," a voice said from somewhere she couldn't see. Emily didn't flinch. "You got paranoid. Paranoid is why I'm still breathing." A figure stepped out from behind a tree line 20 meters to her left. James Doyle, 51 years old, built like a tree stump, beard grown out to a length that said he hadn't seen a mirror in weeks. He was holding a hunting rifle with the casual ease of a man who had held weapons his entire adult life and saw no reason to stop now. He lowered the rifle when he confirmed her face. "I thought you were dead," he said. "Everybody does." "Yeah, well, I stopped believing official reports about 10 years ago." He walked toward her, and when he was close enough, he did something Emily didn't expect. He hugged her, hard. The kind of hug that said, "I mourned you, and I'm furious, and I'm relieved, and don't you ever do that to me again," all in a single crushing embrace. Emily hugged him back, and for 3 seconds she let herself feel the weight of what she'd lost. The team, The bonds. The people who understood her without explanation, because they had been forged in the same fire. Doyle pulled back. Ramos is dead. I know about Ramos. I know. The house fire, Peterson. I know that too. And Chen vanished. Just gone. No body, no trace, no nothing. Doyle, I know. I know all of it. That's why I'm here. His jaw worked. His eyes were wet, but he'd die before he let a tear fall. Who? Ashworth. The name hit Doyle like a physical blow. He actually stepped backward. His grip tightened on the rifle, and the color drained from his face the same way it had drained from the Bravo operator's face in that hospital corridor. Ashworth, he repeated. Our Ashworth. Our Ashworth. He's been feeding personnel information to a network of private military contractors. Meridian Defense Solutions. Blackridge Global. The same firms that profited from the arms pipeline we disrupted in Syria. He's the reason Ramos is dead. He's the reason Peterson is dead. He's the reason someone sent 10 men into a hospital to kill me. Doyle was quiet for a long time. He stared at the ground, and Emily could see the gears turning. The same sharp, tactical mind that had kept him alive through a dozen impossible operations, now processing a betrayal that rewrote every mission he'd ever served. What do you need? He asked. I need you to come in. Come in where? Back to the government that's trying to kill us? Back to the people trying to stop it. Hayes and Catherine Holt at NSA. They're building a case. But it's 3 people, Doyle. 3 people against a rear admiral with Pentagon access and a private army. I need you. You need a crazy old man living in a cabin with a rifle and a bad knee. I need Senior Chief James Doyle, the best intelligence analyst I've ever worked with, who can read a financial document the way most people read a comic book. And yes, I need the crazy old man too. Doyle almost smiled. Almost. You always did know how to ask. Is that a yes? He looked back at his cabin. Whatever life he'd built out here, the quiet mornings, the isolation, the fiction of safety, he was about to leave it behind. Emily knew what that cost because she'd paid it herself 36 hours ago. It's a yes, he said, but I want something in return. Name it. When we get Ashworth, and I mean when, not if, I want to be in the room. I want to look him in the face and ask him one question. What question? I want to ask him if he thought about us when he signed those papers, when he sold those names, when he sent those contractors to kill the people he used to command. I want to know if he thought about us even once. Emily met his eyes. We'll get you that room. Day 6, 8:47 a.m., the Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia. Emily had been inside the Pentagon twice before, both times as Lieutenant Commander Hale, both times in uniform, both times surrounded by people who knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of. Walking through the same corridors as Emily Carter, civilian consultant, wearing a borrowed blazer and carrying a briefcase full of fabricated credentials, felt like wearing someone else's skin. Hayes walked beside her. He had dressed down to a service khaki uniform, no medals, no ribbons, nothing that would draw attention. They moved through security, passed 3 checkpoints, and entered the E-ring corridor that led to the classified briefing rooms. He's already inside, Hayes said quietly. Emily's heart rate didn't change. She had prepared for this the way she prepared for every operation. Visualization, breathing, compartmentalization. She had played this moment in her mind 100 times over the past 6 days, testing every scenario, every possible reaction, every contingency. But preparation doesn't eliminate fear. It just gives you a place to put it. Remember, Hayes continued, your doctor, Emily Carter, medical training consultant from the Defense Health Agency. You're here to observe and take notes. You don't engage Ashworth directly. You let him see you. That's all. That's all, Emily repeated. Hayes pushed open the door. The briefing room held 12 people seated around an oval table. Military officers, Department of Defense civilians, 2 representatives from Naval Special Warfare Command, and at the far end of the table, directly facing the door, Rear Admiral Peter Ashworth. He was 63 now, still tall, still angular. His hair had gone fully gray since Emily last saw him, and the lines around his eyes had deepened into permanent trenches. But his posture was the same, rigid, commanding, the posture of a man who had spent 40 years giving orders and expected the universe to comply. Emily walked in behind Hayes. She kept her eyes on the table. She sat down in the chair Hayes had arranged for her, 3 seats from Ashworth's left. She opened her briefcase. She pulled out a notepad, and then she looked up. Ashworth was scanning the new arrivals, a routine glance, the kind of automatic assessment every senior officer makes when someone enters their space. His eyes passed over Hayes, passed over the aide behind Hayes, and landed on Emily. He didn't react. Not immediately. His expression held for 1 full second, a mask of professional neutrality, and Emily felt a flicker of doubt. Maybe Holt was wrong. Maybe he was innocent. Maybe this was all a terrible mistake. Then she saw it. His left hand, resting on the table beside his coffee cup, contracted. Not a fist, not a clench. A single involuntary spasm, the index finger curling inward and pressing hard against the wood surface. The kind of micro-expression you can only see if you've spent years studying human beings under extreme stress. The kind of tell that polygraph operators spend months learning to detect. Ashworth recognized her, and in that half-second spasm, he told Emily everything his mouth would never say. His eyes stayed locked on hers for 2 seconds. 3. 4. Emily didn't blink. She didn't smile. She didn't nod. She held his gaze with the patience of a woman who had waited 3 years for this moment and was willing to wait 3 more. Ashworth looked away first. He reached for his coffee cup. His hand was steady, but the cup trembled almost imperceptibly when it reached his lips. He drank, set it down, folded his hands on the table, and for the rest of the briefing, he did not look in Emily's direction again. But Emily watched him. Every breath, every shift, every time he moved his pen or adjusted his posture or swallowed. She cataloged it all with the same precision she'd used to map hospital corridors and count enemy combatants. When the briefing ended 70 minutes later, Ashworth stood, exchanged brief words with the officer beside him, and walked toward the door. He would have to pass within 4 feet of Emily to reach it. She stood, stepped into his path, not aggressively, not confrontationally, just enough that he would have to acknowledge her or make an obvious effort to avoid her. He stopped. "I don't believe we've met," Emily said. She extended her hand. "Dr. Emily Carter, Defense Health Agency." Ashworth looked at her hand, then at her face. Up close, she could see the war happening behind his eyes, a battle between the composure of a man who had deceived the entire Pentagon for years and the raw animal terror of seeing a ghost. He shook her hand. His grip was firm. His palm was damp. "Rear Admiral Ashworth," he said. His voice was steady. "Welcome to the Pentagon, Dr. Carter." "Thank you, Admiral. I've heard a great deal about your work." Something flashed across his face, there and gone. "Is that so? Particularly your leadership during overseas operations, the Syria theater specifically. I understand you oversaw some remarkable units." Ashworth's jaw tightened. A fractional movement, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. Emily was looking for it. "That was a long time ago," he said. "Legacies last, Admiral. The people you commanded, the lives you shaped, those things don't stay in the past. They have a way of coming back." The words hung between them like a blade. Ashworth's eyes hardened. For one terrifying, exhilarating second, Emily thought he might break, might say something, might crack the mask and let the truth pour out in the middle of a Pentagon corridor with 11 witnesses standing 10 feet away. He didn't. "Enjoy your time in Washington, Dr. Carter," he said. Then he walked past her and through the door and disappeared into the stream of uniforms and suits that filled the E-ring hallway. Emily stood still. She exhaled slowly through her nose. Hayes appeared beside her. "Well?" His left hand spasmed when he saw me. His palm was sweating when he shook my hand. His pupils dilated when I mentioned Syria. "He knows who I am, Jonathan, and he knows we're coming." Then we moved tonight. 9:22 p.m. Holt was waiting at the safe house in Arlington when Emily and Hayes arrived. Doyle was already there, seated at a table covered with printed financial records, satellite imagery, and communications intercepts. He looked up when Emily walked in and gave a nod that said, "I found something." "Talk to me," Emily said. "I've been running the Blackridge Global financials against the timeline of the 3 deaths. Ramos, Peterson, Chen." Doyle pointed to a document. 3 separate payments from Blackridge to subcontracted security consultants. Each payment made within 72 hours of the corresponding death. The amounts varied, but the routing was identical. Same intermediary bank, same shell structure, same digital signature protocol. "Can we trace the authorization back to Ashworth?" "Not directly, but here's where it gets interesting. The authorization codes used to approve those payments require a Pentagon-grade cryptographic key. There are only 19 people in the Department of Defense who hold that key class. Ashworth is one of them. 19 is too many. A defense lawyer would argue reasonable doubt. Agreed, which is why I kept digging." Doyle pulled out a second document. 2 hours ago, Catherine's team intercepted a communication from Ashworth's private phone, not his government phone. A personal device registered to a name that doesn't match any of his known aliases. The message was sent to an encrypted relay that Catherine's people have been monitoring for 3 months. "What did it say?" Doyle read it. "Carter confirmed, alive. Briefing attendance today. Assume full compromise. Initiate Protocol 7. The room went silent. Emily felt her blood thicken. Protocol 7. She didn't know what it meant, but the word protocol attached to a number meant a predetermined response plan. It meant Ashworth had anticipated being discovered. It meant he had a contingency. "What's Protocol 7? She asked. "We don't know yet," Holt said, "but the relay he sent it to is linked to Blackridge Global's operations network. Whatever Protocol 7 is, it's already in motion." "How long do we have?" "If it's an elimination order, hours. If it's an evidence destruction sequence, less." Emily looked at Hayes. "We can't wait. If Ashworth destroys the evidence trail, we lose everything. Shaw's testimony becomes uncorroborated. The financial records become circumstantial. He walks." Hayes picked up the secure phone. "I'll call the Attorney General. With the intercept and Shaw's testimony combined, we have enough for an emergency warrant." "Make the call. Now." Hayes dialed. Emily turned to Doyle. "Coe, Green, Vargas, are they secure?" "Coe and Green are in protective custody. Vargas was moved to the San Diego safe house yesterday. All 3 are accounted for." "And Shaw?" "Transferred from Fort Resolute to a federal facility in Virginia 6 hours ago. 12 armed marshals. He's untouchable." Emily nodded. "One piece at a time, one person at a time. The way you survive every operation, not by winning all at once, but by making sure no one else dies while you're fighting." At 10:14 p.m., Hayes set the phone down. "Warrant is signed. FBI counterintelligence is moving on Ashworth's residence in 30 minutes. Simultaneously, a team is executing a seizure order on Blackridge Global servers at their Virginia headquarters." Emily looked at the clock. 30 minutes. After 3 years of hiding, 3 years of pretending to be someone else, 3 years of checking seals and counting exits and sleeping with one eye open, it was going to end in 30 minutes. "I want to be there," she said. "Emily, you're a classified asset. You can't be present at a federal arrest." I don't need to be in the room. I just need to be close enough to know it's done. Hayes hesitated. Then he looked at Doyle, who shrugged in a way that said, "You're not going to win this one." "In the car," Hayes said. "You stay in the car." 10:47 p.m. The FBI hit Ashworth's residence at exactly 10:48. Emily sat in the back of a black SUV parked on the street, 200 meters from the front door, watching through the windshield as 12 agents in tactical gear breached the entrance and flooded the house. She couldn't hear the words. She couldn't see the moment they put hands on him, but she felt it. The way you feel a change in pressure before a storm. The way you feel a building shift before it collapses. At 10:53, the front door opened and Peter Ashworth walked out between two agents, hands cuffed behind his back, head up, shoulders straight. Even now, even in handcuffs, he carried himself like an admiral. They walked him toward a waiting vehicle. As they crossed under a streetlight, Ashworth turned his head. He couldn't have seen the SUV. The windows were tinted. The street was dark. There was no way he could have known she was there. But he looked directly at her. And Emily looked back. The agents put him in the car. The door closed. The vehicle pulled away. Emily sat in the silence and listened to her own breathing. Doyle, sitting beside her, said nothing for a long time. Then he spoke. "You think it's over?" "No. Ashworth is one man. Calder is still in the Caymans. Webb hasn't been touched yet. Blackridge has contracts in 14 countries. The network isn't gone. We cut the head off one snake, and there are a dozen more." Then what was today? Emily thought about it. Today was proof. Proof that people who sell out their own can be reached. Proof that hiding doesn't work, for them or for us. And proof that the people they tried to erase are still standing. Doyle nodded slowly. What happens now? Hayes is standing up a joint task force. NSA, FBI, counterintelligence, and a select team from Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Holt is running the intelligence side. I'm running the operational side. You? Me. Thought you wanted out. Thought you wanted normal. Emily almost laughed. I wanted a lot of things. But you know what I figured out in that hospital? When those men came through the door and I had a gun in my hand and people screaming behind me? What? Normal was never the thing I needed. Purpose was. And I spent 3 years confusing one for the other. Day 19. Fort Resolute Military Medical Center. 7 a.m. Emily walked through the rebuilt front entrance of the hospital wearing scrubs, a visitor's badge, and an expression that made the new security guards straighten up without knowing why. The lobby had been repaired. New glass, new doors, new security checkpoint with reinforced barriers and armed federal officers. The floor was clean. The walls were freshly painted. Everything looked new. But if you listened carefully, you could still hear the echo. She walked upstairs to the ICU and found Linda Marsh at the nurses' station, exactly where she'd been standing 20 days ago when Emily Carter walked in for her first shift, and Linda decided she didn't like her. Linda looked up. Her face went through 5 expressions in 3 seconds and settled on one Emily had never seen directed at her before. Joy. Well, Linda said, her voice cracking just enough to betray everything she was trying to hide. Look who decided to show up. I owe you a shift. You owe me a heart attack is what you owe me. I've had FBI agents, Army investigators, and 2 senators in this building in the last 3 weeks, and every single one of them asked me about the rookie nurse in Station 4, and I had to stand there and pretend I knew what the hell they were talking about. Emily put her hands on the counter. Linda, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. You don't need to be sorry. You need to buy me a steak dinner and explain everything from the beginning. I can't explain everything. Then explain what you can and make it a good steak. Deal. Priya appeared from around the corner carrying an armload of patient charts and nearly dropped all of them. Emily, oh my God, Emily! She set the charts down on the nearest surface, which happened to be a sleeping patient's lap, and threw her arms around Emily with a force that would have impressed a linebacker. "You came back. You actually came back. Carl said you wouldn't, but I told him he was wrong, and I was right, and—" Priya, breathing. "Right, sorry, breathing." She pulled back, eyes glistening. "Are you staying?" Emily looked down the corridor. Room 714 was empty now. Shaw was gone. The MPs were gone. The bullet holes in the wall had been patched and painted over. You would never know that 20 days ago, this hallway had been a battlefield. But Emily knew. She would always know. "I'm not coming back as a nurse," she said, "at least not full-time. But I'm going to be working with military medical personnel at the base, training them. And I wanted to start here, with the people who were here that day." Linda frowned. Training them for what? For the thing nobody wants to think about. What happens when violence finds a hospital? How to stay calm, how to move patients, how to make decisions when every second counts and nobody's coming to help. "You want to train nurses to survive what we survived. I want to make sure that if it ever happens again, anywhere, the people inside have a chance." Linda was quiet for a moment. She took off her reading glasses and cleaned them on her scrub top, which Emily had learned was what she did when she was feeling something too big to say out loud. "When do we start?" Linda asked. Emily looked at her, at Priya, at Carl, who had appeared at the end of the corridor with his arms crossed and an expression that said, "I knew you weren't just a nurse." "We already did," Emily said. Day 22, Naval Special Warfare Training Center, Coronado, California, 0600. 47 combat medics stood in formation. The youngest was 22, the oldest was 31. They had survived the most brutal medical training pipeline the military had to offer. They could perform surgery under fire, stabilize a traumatic amputation in under 90 seconds, and keep a dying soldier alive long enough to reach a surgeon who could save them. They were the best, and they had no idea what was about to walk through the door. Emily entered the training bay in unmarked fatigues, no rank insignia, no name tape. She stood in front of them and said nothing for 10 seconds. She let the silence build until it became uncomfortable, and then she let it build a little more. "My name is not important," she said. "My rank is not important. What's important is that 3 weeks ago, 10 armed men stormed a military hospital. They killed 2 security officers. They took hostages. They had a plan, they had training, and they had every advantage. And they failed. Every single one of them. Does anyone want to know why?" Silence. They failed because there was one person in that building who had been trained for chaos. One person who didn't freeze. One person who turned a hospital into a battleground and used every piece of knowledge she had to keep people alive. She paused. That person should not have been alone, and from this day forward, she won't be. Because I am going to teach you what no textbook, no simulation, and no classroom can give you. I am going to teach you what happens inside your body and inside your mind when the radios go dead and the lights go out and someone is pointing a weapon at a person you swore to protect. She looked at their faces, young, eager, terrified, good. "Calm is not something you feel," she said. "It's something you build. You build it through repetition, through exposure, through understanding exactly how fear works in the human brain and choosing, deliberately, to override it. That's what we're going to do here, every day, until it's not a choice anymore, until it's reflex." She stepped forward. "Now, who wants to go first?" Every hand went up. 3 weeks later, Holt's task force executed its second major arrest. Marcus Webb was taken into custody at his home in McLean, Virginia, on 27 counts of conspiracy, espionage, and accessory to murder. Richard Calder was extradited from the Cayman Islands 4 days after that. The Blackridge Global servers yielded over 11,000 classified documents that had been illegally transferred to private entities over a 7-year period. Ashworth cooperated, not out of remorse, out of calculation. He traded testimony for a life sentence instead of a death penalty recommendation. And in doing so, he gave investigators the names of 14 additional co-conspirators embedded across 3 branches of the U.S. military and 2 allied intelligence services. It was the largest internal defense corruption case in American history. Emily's name never appeared in a single report. On a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after the attack on Fort Resolute, Emily walked into the hospital one last time. She wore the same scrubs, the same ponytail, the same quiet walk that had once made Linda Marsh bet $10 she'd cry before lunch. She checked the seal on a supply cabinet. She checked it twice. Then she turned and walked toward the training center, where 47 medics were waiting to learn the most important lesson she would ever teach. That strength is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward while fear is screaming at you to stop. And the woman the United States government once tried to erase, the woman 10 gunmen thought they could bury, the woman who traded a classified past for a borrowed name and a pair of blue scrubs, walked through those doors knowing exactly who she was. Not a ghost, not a secret, a shield. And she was just getting started. Opus 4.6 Extended.